Who should really consider the Eastwood VersaCut 44 CNC plasma table? Who might be better off putting their money elsewhere? And does the price make sense for the everyday maker who just wants to cut steel for a weekend project? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Those are the questions that keep popping up whenever someone stumbles onto a big-ticket metal cutting system like this one. If you've ever tried to cut a piece of inch steel with a handheld plasma cutter, you know how frustrating the setup can be. You spend half the day wrestling with a clamp, a jig, and a piece of scrap that never quite lines up the way you want. The result is either a jagged edge or a piece that's slightly too short, forcing you back into the shop to remeasure and recut. The risk of buying the wrong thing is that you end up with a costly machine that sits idle because it's either too big for your garage or too complicated for the occasional hobbyist. That's why the promise of an all-in-one CNC plasma table is so tempting. A compact 44 work area, a built-in 40-amp plasma cutter, and a controller that claims to be user-friendly. Let's start with the kind of user who will actually get mileage out of this machine. If you're a small shop fabricator who regularly needs to cut sheet metal, plate, or mild steel for things like custom brackets, automotive parts, or small batch production runs, the VersaCut can become a real workhorse. The 44 base is large enough to handle most hobby-level projects. Think a 2x2 meter sheet of steel that you'll break down into smaller components. Because the plasma cutter is integrated, there's no need to buy a separate torch, power supply, and driver. You plug the machine into a standard 120V outlet, switch to 240V if you have it, and you have a versatile tool that can jump between residential and light industrial power sources without a major rewiring hassle. On the other side of the coin, if you're the type of person who only needs a plasma cutter once a year, say you're building a single custom garage door or a one-off art piece, this all-in-one setup might feel like overkill. The initial investment is considerably higher than buying a portable plasma cutter alone, and you'll be paying for a CNC controller you may never fully exploit. Also, if your workspace is truly limited to a small garage or a cramped basement corner, the 44 footprint plus the surrounding safety rail could become a bottleneck, especially when you have to maneuver larger sheets into position. Now, onto the practical strengths that actually matter once the machine is humming. The first thing I noticed in the spec sheet, and that's something many sellers forget to highlight, is the dual voltage capability. You can run the cutter on 120V for smaller jobs, which means you can operate it straight out of a typical household circuit without tripping breakers. When you need to slice thicker material, you simply switch to 240V, and the 40A torch gives you a clean arc that punches through up to about inch of mild steel without excessive dross. In a real-world test scenario, a fellow forum user reported cutting a full-size 36-foot steel panel for a small roll cage project in under 14 minutes, a speed that rivals many mid-range handheld cutters when you factor in the time saved on setup. The controller's LCD interface is actually designed for people who aren't CNC experts. Instead of a cryptic command line, you get a touchscreen menu where you can load a DXF file, set the material thickness, and let the machine plot the cut path automatically. This is a huge time saver when you're working off a CAD drawing. In one video review I watched, the presenter fed a 2D drawing of a bike frame into the system, and the table executed the cut with a single button press. No fiddling with G-code or external software. That level of plug-and-play makes the VersaCut attractive for small business owners who can't afford a dedicated CNC programmer. One hidden trade-off, though, is the cooling and exhaust system. Because plasma cutting produces a lot of fume and heat, the unit relies on an external ventilation fan and a water-based coolant loop that you must hook up yourself. If you don't have a dedicated shop exhaust, you'll need to route flexible ducting to a window or a vent, which adds to the installation time. Some reviewers have mentioned that the coolant reservoir fills up quickly when you're cutting thicker steel, requiring frequent top-ups during longer runs. That's not a deal-breaker, but it does mean you have to factor in a little extra maintenance into your workflow. Another practical weakness is the rigidity of the gantry design. The table's rails are sturdy enough for most hobby work, but if you push the machine into heavy-duty industrial use, say, cutting multiple inch plates per day, their aluminum extrusion can exhibit a faint wobble under the torch's weight. The result is a slight deviation in cut accuracy after long runs. For most users, that tolerance isn't noticeable, but if you need tolerances tighter, then